Hi there. My name's Mark Baum, and I work for Soliant Consulting. Welcome to my Claris Engage 2020 session, Keeping Your Career on Track. Discipline, habit, passion, or curiosity. For many of us, it's human nature. Once you learn how to do something, you tend to keep doing it that way. You'd like to master every new technique and embrace every technology, but your time is limited, and it's spent meeting your clients' or employers' immediate needs. How do you invest in your career while staying productive? Where do you put your time? Growing as a business analyst or UX expert, adopting coding practices, understanding use cases for AI and machine learning, or everything at once? In this session, I'll share reflections from my colleagues at Soliant Consulting about their careers and how they put time into developing them. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a senior application developer at Soliant, a consulting company. A few years back, I worked at Claris, where I helped to produce earlier versions of this very conference. I'm a public speaker and performer, trained as an actor, storyteller, and singer, and I love to conduct interviews. In my 20s, my oral history work was published and performed in theaters around the country. Finally, I'm a curious person. When I was young, one of my favorite bedtime stories was The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling. In the course of my life, I haven't met any crocodiles, but I have met some very interesting people. I'd like this session to leave you feeling encouraged and inspired by hearing from other people, or maybe self-accepting instead. There are a lot of ways to approach what you do for a living, and you're likely to do different things at different times. I hope that what you hear in this session resonates, but doesn't make you feel like you're living your life wrong. Here's a quote from Elizabeth Gilbert, from a radio interview with Krista Tippett. It stopped me in my tracks as I was cooking breakfast one Sunday morning. I think curiosity is our friend that teaches us how to become ourselves. It's a very gentle friend, and a very forgiving friend, and a very constant one. Passion is not so constant, not so gentle, not so forgiving, and sometimes not so available. I proposed this session because I don't take the time I should, or think I should, to invest in my career. I don't do a lot of study outside of my typical 40 to 50 hours a week, and I wanted to hear from other people about the things that they do, or don't do, to grow professionally. It's funny, I say I don't invest time outside my workday, but when Claris Engage comes around, I pour my heart and soul into these sessions. Granted, this year I had a lot to learn about video and had considerable obstacles to my recording process, like having to turn off the air conditioner in 120-degree heat, snoring dogs, and airplanes. But I looked at the time I log, and I put nearly 350 hours into these two sessions combined. That made me curious about last year, and it was still about 240 hours just for one session. So I guess I can put in time outside of work when I feel passionate about something. More of my time went into the first session this year, the one about emotional intelligence, which I recommend, so I had to scale back my plans for this one. Rather than presenting a formal talk followed by an hour of interview clips, I'm going to focus on the interview clips alone. I'm excited to share them with you. Over the past month or so, I met with 19 of my colleagues at Soliant Consulting to hear how they invest in their careers. Each interview lasted about 45 minutes. I encourage people not to give advice, but instead to speak from personal experience to give you some room for reflection. Although our goal was to produce something public, I asked each person to talk just with me, to forget about having an audience, and to share whatever they were prepared to trust me with. They would get to review the final result and could ask me not to publish it if it felt too personal. Everyone was great. They all showed up as who they are instead of putting on a show. I asked 5 questions, more or less. How do you approach your career, and do you have a plan? What's easy about investing in your career, and what's hard, especially now? How do discipline, habit, passion, and curiosity figure in all of this? I'm interested in passion and curiosity as the things that motivate us, and discipline and habit as the things that keep us going when motivation fails. When you're required to do something, how do you motivate yourself? How do you handle the shoulds and the musts? And finally, now that we've talked about all this stuff, is there anything else inside of you that just wants to be said? I spent about 3 hours editing each interview, finding short statements that I found compelling and that had some rhythm and shape to them. The quality of the video varied considerably, and unfortunately I had to throw away lots of good material due to dropouts in the internet connection. Usually it was my favorite line. Once I had chosen the statements, I worked on organizing them, playing with them like parts of a musical composition or a documentary, listening for how they could build on one another and tell a larger story. Here's the result. You know, I realize you might not know these people, but for me, spending so many hours watching and listening to them has deepened my affection for every one of them. I hope some of that love comes through, and that for you, hearing their experience is helpful and affirming.
I'm an early riser. That works to my benefit. So I get up at, I don't know, 5:30 in the morning, and I'm at my desk at 6. Right? I make my coffee along the way because I need lots of coffee. Um, but that means that I can give myself a really long day. Um, and what that does for me is I can pace myself. Right? I can spend a couple of hours trying to read, do some research, figure something out before I need to do my client meetings, my work meetings, all the other things that we can't really avoid that we must do that are part of our daily lives. Um, the danger is that I make my day really long, that I start really early, say 6 o'clock in the morning, and that I go until I'm so tired that I don't want to go anymore. The, the danger, I guess, with really liking something, whether it's work or walking in the woods or watching birds, whatever it may be, the danger is that you'll overdo it. Because if you give yourself something that you really like, be it work or the other things that I've said, it becomes your safe bubble. So if you have some adversity in your life, there's a big risk that you'll run to your safe bubble and hide in it. And that would make that safe bubble, I guess, disproportionately important in your life. And I've done that in my past. I've certainly used work or the invention, if you will, of something new, um, because other areas in my life weren't very well. And instead of dealing with them directly, I go like, I'll leave this one be. I'll go where I'm safe, which is work and inventing things and exploration. Um, some of the things that I've done come from periods like that. FM Robot that I made, I don't know how long ago, clearly came from a period of that in my life where things weren't very great, and I had plenty of time. I gave myself plenty of time. It's not that I had plenty of time. I took plenty of time, and I took it away from the other areas in my life that I probably should have spent some more time with at the time. Um, I guess there's a positive and a negative to that. The negative would be if you stay in that. If you really blow it out of proportion and say, I'm only going to do that because this makes me feel good. All the rest doesn't make me feel good. Um, that would be the negative side. The positive side of that is you do have the safe haven. You do have a place in your life that you enjoy, that you are yourself, I guess, where you can just let it all go. Like you can be your own self. Um, find the trick is finding the balance.
So this whole thing of learning new things and advancing your career technology wise, or just knowledge, your knowledge base as a person in the tech industry, for me has been difficult, and that just is par for the course for the area of life that I'm in right now. You know, all the things that come along with fatherhood and owning a new home and trying to kind of support your family during this new phase of life. We've got a new baby, and another one coming, and all that stuff. um, I'm not the first that's gone through it, and I won't be the last. But for me, it's been something that I've had to mainly identify as something that is difficult. So, looking at it and just saying, okay, this is a thing. This is a real thing in my life, and it's probably going to continue for a few more years. But I can't let that stop me from learning. And I think my approach has been more as a result of not really having a lot of time outside of work hours to dedicate, as others may. Um, I've had to simply just kind of double down on prioritizing when I'm trying to learn something and really set my attention to it and just get it done. Not saying that always happens, but that's the goal sometimes, is to kind of block out things. Maybe I won't read my notifications for a while. My attitude has been, if somebody really needs something, maybe they'll call me, call me, email me, whatever the case may be, but turn off the chat, turn off whatever. And just really say, this is my time to try to get better.
I am still figuring out the path forward. So there's some murkiness that makes me nervous, because I really like certainty, and I really like clarity. And I'm always thinking about risk, because all of that's my job. And I'm good at that. So kind of seeing where I would like to be as a managing director eventually, and where I'm at now, and not being entirely sure about the best path there, or the best skills to develop, is a little nerve-wracking for me. The way that I'm planning to shore that up is by talking to people who are in those positions already, and people I trust, my mentors, my boss, who is a managing director right now and is amazing at it, and really asking the people that I trust what areas they see in me that are strengths, what strengths that would kind of naturally flow into that type of a role, and that I should focus on developing. And looking at my weaknesses too. While I want to not fixate on them, I want to at least be aware of what they are. And then that way I can look for team members or colleagues that help me shore up those weaknesses, because they have strengths in those areas.
Well, it may sound a little surprising, but I've never really had a real career path that I've laid out for myself. A lot of what I've done has been just sort of going to where things look like they should go next. So there's not a lot of plan or discipline in what I've done or how I approach things. I've always thought that it's easier to row downstream than upstream, right? So you look to see where the current's going and just try to get in the current and go with it, as opposed to fighting it. And so usually for me that means I don't have a big long-term picture. It's much easier for me to see the next 2 or 3 moves as opposed to the next 10 moves. And I guess I've always taken the approach that if I just keep taking the right next 2 or 3 moves, that the long term will play out in a decent way. It may not have been a way that I would have predicted, but it should be an okay way. And that's sort of been my governing philosophy is don't try to steer too much, right? Make the decisions you can make along the way with confidence, as opposed to trying to think about the implications of this in 10 moves down the road. And I guess I've also gravitated toward stuff that just seems interesting at the time, or just seems like the right place to be. So a lot of kind of gut instinct, like this just feels like the right move for me or family, company. I think curiosity plays a lot into that. I think if I had to use a couple words to describe myself, curiosity or curious would be near the top of that list. And I think that's governed sort of what I've chosen to learn and focus on. And I think it's certainly been a big factor in just how I approach everything I do. Is I try to come with a sense of curiosity and eagerness to learn new things.
Soliant's such a big developer community, right? And such a big company. where do I want to go? It's also a company that has incredible longevity with the people there. So I did start to realize that career paths, upward jobs may or may not be where I want to get to, because there may be someone in place who's been there 15 years and they're very good at what they do. So I started to think of just how would I be the best at what I'm doing, which I'm a developer, application developer here. But what it would be my sense of satisfaction, my sense of learning what I want to learn and applying that and getting to apply that. I love the thought of being a good team player. I really do. It's just my nature. Did play all team sports, didn't do any solo sports. Maybe where I would be heading, because I do like working with people, is into more of a customer focused role as well as development, because I don't have that passion that some do for getting down to the incredibly nitty-gritty detail about functionality of, how server core works or something like that. I just pulled that out, I don't know. But I do like working with people, again, maybe towards that problem solving, which of all the FileMaker mantras, when they would throw those at us as like the problem solver's problem solver, I'm like, I'm good with that. I like that. That's what we do. That one spoke to me. You may go poo-poo. Or maybe you came up with that one. I don't know.
Part of my job is untying knots, where you have to work at it and get things untangled.
What do you like about that?
I like the challenge of it. I don't like feeling like I don't know what's going on, but it's I don't like starting out that learning curve, but that's always a little bit difficult, but it feels better once you start getting into it and things start making sense and start clicking.
Tell me in more detail about that beginning place where it is difficult. How do you do that?
There's probably mainly two ways that come to mind that I can think of. One is if you're trying to learn something, you're only going to absorb so much at a time. So there is kind of a discipline where you have to do a little bit and then you have to know when to stop and kind of step away and maybe go sleep on it and let your brain work and come back to it, and then the next day it'll make sense. And the other way is just putting your nose down and just bulldogging through stuff. Kind of trying to force your way through stuff. So it's probably a kind of a combination of both. It really helps if I have some actual work, some billable work that I'm doing, where it's like, okay, I need to figure this out because it's actually for a project, right? That helps motivate me. There is just I have been motivated by just the challenge of something. Like, somebody will mention, hey, I can do, it'd be cool if this could do this. It's like, okay, I think I could do that. Let me go try and figure it out. There is part of it that's ego. I don't like to admit that, it's all ego, but because I do like sharing. And a big motivation in that is a lot of times it's just so I get to learn something better too. One of my earliest college classes that was like the most difficult. It was a part of our biology class called Teach About Biology, where you had to work in a group and you had to randomly select one of the lessons, and then the next time you met in that group, you had to teach that lesson to everybody else in the group. And you didn't just get one, like, of course, right? They assign you like 10 different things. So you had to learn them all well enough, not to just, answer a multiple choice question, but to actually be able to explain that subject to everybody else there. So that's part of why I do some of the things too. Like, I've written blog posts where I get started down and do an initial kind of brain dump and draft, and then, oh, well, I'm going to have to really go back and rethink this, maybe look a few things up where I can explain them better. So some of that's a motivation for me too, just so I get to learn it better myself.
I think one of the things that's been on my mind is that there's certain things that I just don't like doing. And I think there are times when it's holding me back. So like an example of that is just it's like the notion of putting myself out there, for instance, like blog posts or doing the Soliant educational videos or something like that. It's something that has been on my what's our planning document called? The thing that the annual agreements that we make, to try to what are the goals you're trying to achieve this year? I frequently have this on there, like, okay, I'm going to write a blog post, or I'm going to research something and put it out there, make a video. And of course, Martha's been my mentor for ages, and she's the queen of all of that stuff. And I just never do it. Like, I never do it. So even though I write down the goal and I feel fired up about it, and the day that I'm talking to Martha about it, and then just whatever happens, work happens, life happens, and it's constantly at the bottom of the priority list, and I don't know what that's about. Like, trying to put my finger on what that is, like what is preventing me from doing that. It's like I never prioritize it. And I know that part of it for me is just like, yeah, just put yourself out there. The fear of like doing that, it's kind of, I don't know, it's when I'm sitting here talking to you about it, it feels like, oh, it's lame, but it's real for me, right? It's a real, like, it's like an internal fear or something. So anyway, I need to overcome that. Like, I just need to it's funny when I talk to Martha about it, it's always just take any old subject that you have any degree of passion about and just start working on it. She's like, there's tons of people out in the community who are they're brand new to FileMaker. They don't know anything. And, so something that it could feel quite banal can still be beneficial to somebody else. You don't have to be talking or blogging about something on the cutting edge of FileMaker or whatever. It can be any old thing. And, even with that, couched in that framework, I still don't do it. And so I don't know how to overcome it. I haven't overcome it yet. I need to, though. I feel like it's something I need to do, It's one of these things, like, I would imagine that once I do it once, it'll be just like, that was easy. Like, I don't know why I had all that hang up about it. I'm sure it will feel that way. So anyway, that's something that's on my mind. I do think that it's probably also, career limiting. Like, when you look across, I have been with Soliant now for over 7 years. I have not yet written one blog post, not one. And that's it's weird, right? It's just like, okay, I certainly know a lot of stuff. I just don't contribute in that way. So it's just one of those things. It's been on my mind, the back of my mind, and I would like to conquer it somehow. Don't know how.
As a leader, you can do a lot to avoid learning things that you don't enjoy learning, to be just super candid. Many years ago, I tried to learn to run a team, and that involved a lot of management and a lot of performance discussions and a lot of invoicing. They were not super strengths of mine. And so eventually, there's a bigger school of thought that says if something's not a super strength of yours, the best thing to do is just to let the water run where it wants to run, and don't do that thing. But that's where I become conscious of privilege, because eventually we all hope to get there where we can do the things, we can follow the water where it runs most naturally. But there's a lot of time in between where you just got to do stuff, which is what you're talking about. But I've been pretty lucky, I think, in being able to find roles that let the water go where it wanted to. And I think in the cases where I've had to do this, I sort of try to think outside the immediate situation a little bit. I just sort of think downstream, which is, okay, so I've got these invoices to get out. Why is that important? And there's a little bit of a 5 whys or 3 whys or just a 2 whys. And it's not hard to sort of figure it out. But on the other hand, even as I talk through that, I realize that it's kind of a failing strategy, because those things always feel remote. So I don't know. I think there's there is something about gamification. It's about endorphins, which is last year or so I decided to get better at email management, and I said I was not going to have anything in my inbox. And for about 4 months, I was able to do that because I would dispose of every email every day. I would either put it in the to-do folder, or I would reply to it, or I would move it into a done, I'm not going to look at it again folder. And that worked for about 4 months. But I think the endorphin pleasure of seeing the empty inbox just wore off. I just got exhausted. It was not a long-term strategy. But I guess it's a little speculative for me, but to the degree that I can connect it to something I care about, which is helping people, then it matters. If I think, if I don't do this, somebody's going to have a lousier day tomorrow because this didn't get done. And I know who that person is. I don't have to guess. Mark's going to have a bad day because the PM's going to come and say, well, what about all this work? And I was the one who was supposed to go in and move the work around and say whether it was billable or not, and talk to the PM about why it was done. I didn't do that. So now it's Mark's problem. So if I can move it to a place where there's sort of like, I don't know, it's almost like using people I care about as a human shield. If I can somehow bring them in front of the problem and connected to that and connected to something I care about, then it becomes real.
For me, it starts with some sort of a discomfort, of like, oh, this feels, this doesn't feel quite right. That there's sort of this domain or this area, and I can kind of intuit that it feels like something that it would be good for me to have better understanding of than I do. So it kind of starts with that, and then if I kind of can check that out from different sources, if I hear it from different people, I don't know, hear different people talking about similar things, or it comes up in different client situations, right? Then sort of confirms that, and eventually starts to form a more clearer picture of what are the specific things that I need to devote some attention to. But then, being in a consulting firm, we have our utilization targets, right? And so there's a kind of tension there between devoting time to learning and devoting time to getting a certain level of utilization, because I want to feel, feel a sense of responsibility to kind of do my part in the company, right? I don't want to kind of be a freeloader, so I can kind of do my fun stuff or do the learning stuff and not do that part. So I want to make sure I'm doing that. But if I'm doing that, that doesn't leave a lot of time for the other stuff. So that's the challenge. Some of what I've done in the past is use some of my weekend time, right? But I'm not. See, this is something where, if you're looking for people to give advice of here's how I've solved this problem, this would be a way that I'm not particularly keen on, right? I've done it, but I don't know. I don't see that as like, oh, this is what I want to continue doing, and this is how I think it should be done, right? So it's very much an ongoing kind of figure out how to deal with this, right? I don't know. I mean, one strategy is to pick your timing for that, right? We all go through moments of busy client work and moments of fallowness, right? That's just sort of the natural ebb and flow of consulting. And I've had 3-4 months where I've had a good amount of project work that's kept me busy. So there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for it. So I'm kind of biding my time, waiting for that next fallow moment, so I can kind of dig in some of these other things that I want to look into. So that's a part of it, is finding the time for it. The other part is figuring out how to do it, right? Maybe you would know that you want to learn something, but then what's the kind of most constructive way of doing it? Is it is it finding a book or some video course online, or is it can you find some time from someone else who knows it well that can kind of guide you along with it? Can you find some way of some kind of something that would approximate project work that you could use as a way to sort of practice what you're learning? All those things, right? So just figuring out how to find the best mix of those things.
If I really can't do the work, if I'm really stuck, I will literally get up, walk away, and go do laundry or cook something or whatever it is, right? Something that needs to be done that is not work. And that gets me moving, and then I'm doing something productive, and then maybe I'll run out of steam on that and be able to transfer that momentum into work. Doesn't always work. Sometimes I have to just force myself to take usually the easiest piece, whatever like, I don't care how mindless a task it is. If it has to be done, do it, because at least then you've started and you're working and you actually got something done, or I got something done. And then it's like, okay, well, I've come this far, I can go a little farther. And usually that's enough. It gets me into the zone close enough. The thing is to start, right? And so if I get to a place where I'm stuck, and I'm stuck creatively, it's not that I don't want to do it, it's that I don't know how to do it. I will start doing it anyway. And back in the olden times, I would do it with a pencil, right? I would just grab a blank piece of paper and a pencil, and I would draw a wireframe, and it would be garbage, and I would crumple it up, or I would put it aside. Don't crumple it up, put it aside, because you might need it later. Right? Happened more than once. If I didn't like it, and I would draw it again, and I would try something else, and I would draw something else, and eventually just the act of trying to solve it would illuminate something. And then you could pull that thread and follow it, and it would get you somewhere. And then maybe you'd have something that was at least good enough to show the client. And so I can show the client, and then they can say, well, I like this part, but this part is, no, I don't think this is right. And then you're iterating again, right? You're doing something empirical. And that's what we do. This is custom work, right? I'm not designing a product. I've never designed a product. Not sure how I would go about that. I've always designed products for very specific people who I know personally. That, I like that, because I know who I'm helping.
In order for us to bring people along and add value to their business, we need to actually have some useful and forward-thinking, innovative ideas that are, not just going to be cookie cutter, because we don't sell cookies, like we sell things that you can't buy off the shelf. And if we're going to be doing that, then we have to be looking ahead to what's going to be relevant in 2, 3, 5 years, and with technology changing as quickly and as it always does. That means that we have to be, I personally have to always be keeping my eye on what's practical for us to do now and promise for tomorrow, relative to what we have been doing and still have to maintain, and where we want to be in 6 months, 12 months, as far as process and technology and resources, So that's what's interesting. That's what's challenging about kind of where I sit is, I'm basically trying to always, keep the craft balanced, whether it's towards, not too far towards forward looking and not too far towards backward looking, so that we can still make good headway and close jobs today and tomorrow and get that work, so that has legs and will be still relevant and provide good value for the business. We're not the cheapest company around. That's why people pay us good money, is they want that kind of that's a critical part of our value equation, is that we're giving them the best advice. And so that's really where my primary challenge lies, is sort of like reconciling those three sort of important aspects of the ballast of our organization here.
Probably one of my big passions is just learning about technology. I mean, it really is kind of all encompassing. In my free time, I read lots of blog sites like Ars Technica and Engadget, and just kind of to keep up with what's new. But then I also, I frequently go down a rabbit hole of Googling something or Wikipedia and just kind of really going into depth on one subject. And not because it's something I need to do for work, it's just something that I'm like, I wonder how that works. As an example, not that long ago, Mislav and I have been talking a lot about SSL certificates. And something that I kept getting conflicting information about is having multiple parent certificates. It's always described as a chain, and it took a really long time to figure out that it's not necessarily that cut and dry. It's not a straight chain always. It's just kind of things like that really kind of drive me to be like, how is this actually functioning? And initially, AWS was kind of the same thing too. It's this giant world. There's thousands of services. How do they all work together, or at least the ones that interest me the most? And what can I do to utilize them to make my life easier, either professionally, personally, or just as a toy to see what it can do.
Gosh, yeah, join table. I mean, that's like huge for me. And I consider join table as part of my career. Essentially, what we are is like a matchmaking service, right? So we have a website where you can go sign up and say, I want to be a volunteer. Here's what I'm looking for. I want to work with children. I want to work with veterans, whatever. And then we have also a form for our nonprofits to sign up and say, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I need. This is the size of my project. Those are the kind of criteria that we use to match people up. And it had been going pretty well for about a year. And then COVID hit, and then we were lucky to get, actually Brad, it was like a Friday, I want to say it was like Friday, like at 2 p.m., I got a LinkedIn message from Brad Freitag, and I was like, oh my God, Brad Freitag messaged me. And so we ended up chatting on the phone, and then the next day, Saturday, we had a meeting, and then we kicked off. And then Sunday, that Sunday, that weekend, we had our first project kickoff. And, since we became part of the Claris COVID response team to do pro bono projects for COVID-related needs all throughout the world, we've done projects in France and in India and in, the UK. We've just had so many different projects. But once we had that partnership with Claris, I think the exposure of Join Table just really boomed. Our volunteer base just boomed. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone knew what we were doing and wanted to help. And so that gave us a lot of, a lot of manpower behind our volunteers. I think the thing for me is, you start with one little seed, and then you get that support and that growth, and you're just like, wow. And then it grows bigger and bigger, and you're like, wow, look where we are now. And now all I can think about is I know I have the supportive community behind me, and all I can think about is where we're going next.
I'm a very intentional person, right? I like to learn new things. There can't be too many days gone without me having done something new or different. And it doesn't have to be something big or huge. I'll give you an example, right? Really quickly. The simplest example is sometimes, right? I'm plugged into the sales space so much, right? That I will keep getting emails from email marketing from sales and whatnots, right? And now okay, we'll open them. Most of the times they're dismissed, but sometimes there's a little thing. Boy, that's quick. That's good. I will more than likely open it right in that moment and intentionally study not too much depth, but try to get a sense for what is this about, right? And make notes for myself. This is something deep. I will go later, but for now, I need to know what is this specific thing that they're so excited about sharing with their customers. So I need to know. My intention is just one thing. In what instance may I be using or suggesting this to someone, right? Because that's my job, right? So that's the intentionality of it in my work. This also plays out a little bit in my personal life, right? So I like to do a lot of business reading. For example, Fortune is my favorite magazine. The most important thing I like to read, the fun things that I like to do. It's mostly business, and yeah, you learn about a lot of business, this, that, and the other. But the most important thing is when there is at least a story or two about some guy saying, "I used to be this big time banker, now I'm a cattle rancher," and I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And how did you do that, right? Or how I established my business and what was the impetus for it and all that kind of stuff. This is not directly related to my job, but this is something I sort of try to learn life lessons from those who have lived larger than me, right? Using those for my interactions with my family, even like with my daughter, for example, right? I will use that, right? And say, hey, look at this guy. He did it this way. So you're not too far. Or, maybe you need to get a little bit far. So that's how far my intentionality goes, right? So I love doing that. I'm just an eternal student. I just love learning. I don't know. That's a thing about me. So that's I think I'll pause there as far as intentionality is concerned.
I'm pretty ambitious. I really like to feel like I'm moving forward. I think a lot of people do. They want to feel like they're progressing in their skill sets in their lives. They want to feel like they're moving forward. And in my kind of earlier years, especially with my career, it felt like it needed to be very immediate to me. It really felt like it needed to be a tomorrow, a next year, a really short time frame sort of thing. And I really pushed for that, and I really dedicated a lot of time to that. And I wasn't very happy with it. Like, I was attaining the goals that I set, but I found that I wasn't really happy with the life or the lifestyle that I was leading in that. And then I hit kind of this slow middle period where I was in this space where I was like, okay, like, I'm happy with where I'm at, but I'm not in this kind of really constant motivated moving forward. And yet I'm still ambitious, and I still want to add skill sets, and I still want to feel like I'm moving forward. And so I felt a little bit lost in that. I felt a little bit like, well, I'm comfortable, but I don't really know what's my roadmap? What am I doing next? What is that going to look like? And what helped turn that key for me was expanding that timeline, and was thinking of myself as someone who has value and can add skill sets, not just tomorrow and not just next year, but in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. Like, I can think of myself as someone who is 50 and 60 and 70 and still learning and still contributing and still doing things that are engaging for me. And it was really neat because I've been reading up on what it means for people as they age and their mental acuity. And a lot of the research now is saying, kind of, don't retire if you don't have to. Like, think about how you can be progressing in your career in ways that make sense. I don't always want to work as many hours as I'm working right now, but I want to transform. I want to metamorphose. I want to move forward into other spaces. And so for me, that turned the key of like, okay, what I'm doing now is building towards that instead of being stuck in what I'm doing now.
I think I tend to be pretty practical about what I choose to learn about. Like, so you got me thinking now. I'm thinking of it. So it's more, well, like things like electricity and plumbing. I enjoyed it. I was curious about it, but it's practical. I mean, if you're hiring an electrician or a plumber, it's pretty expensive, and it feels good to do it myself. So I think there is that element of practical skills, gaining practical skills, and then being more self-sufficient. Because I'm thinking maybe I tend to learn more about things that I can effectively apply as opposed to maybe more theoretical. Well, those can certainly be useful skills that are not so much hands-on, but Actually, let me tell you a little bit about how I use concepts from the work that we do in my remodeling to see how pragmatic I can be. So I created, I'm trying to remember how many of them there were. I think I had 80, maybe it was 100 stories, user stories, and the user stories went along the lines of install new vent pipes in the second floor bathroom, replace floor 1 kitchen sink, okay? And I story pointed them, all of them. And then I actually log time against them. I said I had my velocity, and it helped with estimating. So I took that approach from our practice to the side projects that I have. And I think that's been pretty pragmatic and disciplined. But it helped me, it helped me be realistic about realizing there's no way I'm finishing these remodels by the end of the year. It's going to go into next year, kind of thing. So I definitely give a lot of consideration to what's going to be useful for me to learn about. It's not just what I'm curious about or what I feel excited about. I'm looking for something that, well, I was going to say years from now. Things change so quickly in an industry, but hopefully years from now are still applicable and valid. So yeah, it's definitely a pragmatic approach there too.
At the risk of saying a completely inappropriate word that will pigeonhole me in a weird place, I'm kind of a fundamentalist. I like to work on the fundamentals of building software. So to me, how you name fields, how you organize the relationship graph, that kind of fundamental work to me is much more interesting than the latest flashy fancy thing that's coming down the pike. So organizing the building of the application in a way that really architects it so that, number one, in the future, someone coming behind me can understand what I've done. But number two, they can extend it, or they can modify it, or they can update it. And it's relatively easy to do that. That's more interesting to me than AI or machine learning or some new fancy whiz bang gadget. I want to really make the fundamental system work much better. That's more interesting to me than, the latest and greatest thing. And, I work on that every day. So every day that I'm working in systems, I'm trying to simplify them. I'm trying to create patterns that are repeatable, that make sense. I'm constantly revising the techniques that I use to build applications, constantly learning. I pick up stuff from Dean all the time, different techniques and such, and I just steal them from him, and then I make them my own. I change the approach a little bit, or I make it fit into how I'm used to developing software. So I'm a big thief as well.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you have a goal of it? Do you want to just be doing what you're doing? Or you want to be doing something different or in a different way? Do you have any vision of that?
I really don't. If I really think about where I'm going to be in 5 years, I think I'll be doing very similar stuff to what I'm doing right now. And that's not a problem.
Why?
Why is that not a problem? Because I like what I'm doing. It took a long time to get here. I'm enjoying being here.
I've actually had this debate in my head a lot, which is, why does it always feel like I just get lucky? Because that can't actually be true, right? That seems unfair, and like I'm not giving myself enough credit, and something that I've probably struggled with quite a bit. And so why do I get so lucky? Well, I think a lot of it is that I just do stuff, and I'm not scared to try stuff and see how it goes. An example of a place where it didn't work was with WIT FM. I was the marketing lead for a little bit, and it just didn't work for whatever reason. And everyone, I could openly admit to Susan, I'm not doing a good job at this, and can we figure something out? And we did. which was for me not to be the lead anymore. And they're doing better off because of it. So I think it's being willing to step in and try something out, but also being willing to say, this isn't for me. The way I decide what's good for me or what isn't is a lot of gut instinct and thinking about what feels right, and what feels. I feel like we all have our own brand of what we want to be and what we want to promote. And I've always been a cheerleader. Everyone knows what my favorite things are in life because I'm just a walking billboard all the time. But it's because I believe in them and I see something and I want other people to feel those things. And so I think that I don't want to overuse the word passion because I think it gets used too much almost, and it's getting desensitized a little bit. But I think that it's when you bring excitement and when you are passionate about something, that feeds a lot of energy. And so a lot of other things can just be learned or you can figure it out as you go. And so as a manager and as a mentor, I'm always telling people to just do stuff, just try it out, see what happens. If it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out. Failure, it's not failure. And I have mentored people through career changes. I've mentored clients through career changes, and it's just looking at the bigger picture and saying, do what's right for you, and letting people know that they're allowed to think about themselves that way, and that they should be trusting of their own gut instinct.
Yeah, I've never really been confident in the job that I personally do. I really appreciate the feedback because I feel it's like a validation. Someone confirms that you did a good job. Maybe it's something unconscious. I don't know. I just love getting feedback from people, and if it's the person that I look up for, it's even better because I know that I want them to like what I did. At every workplace, there are people that you look up to, mentors, supervisors, and because you do that, you want to be like them in this or that way. You just look at people, how they work, how they communicate with the clients, how they communicate with their peers, and you just learn from them. But yeah, I think in general, my goal hasn't really changed since 3 years ago. I think I'd be very lucky if I get at this work or the next one, just to work with professional people who know what they're doing and that you can learn from, and you can get real collaboration, and you can get feedback. I think that's really all you need from that's really what I need.
I think the biggest breakthrough in finding some balance in that has been really opening up to people that I've chosen to be my mentors, people that I can talk to. And it sort of began for me as people that I talk to about the strategies of work. For some of them, it has begun with purely technical mentors, somebody who's really good at a particular aspect of the work that we do, and I want to learn more from them. And what I have found is that good mentors can talk to me about every aspect of their lives, and they share their experience. So they're not really giving me advice. They don't tell me you should do this or you should do that. It's about them sharing with me how they have done things, so that I can reflect on that. I can take that back and say, I can think about this for a little bit. I can let this sit with me and see if it makes sense for me, if I want to be like them, because that's what it is, right? Because for me, a good mentor is somebody that I want to mirror, somebody that I want to be like when I grow up, that kind of thing. So I look at them and I look at their life, and I look at what they do with their life, and they share their experience and what they have done, the struggles that they've had, their own breakthroughs. So they share that with me, and I go like, well, if I want to be like them, I can see if I can do the same thing. And a lot of that comes into finding that balance as you you know what they say about experience. It's a really bad teacher, right? It gives you it gives you the exam first and then the lesson. I have found that to be true, right? I have found that I had to make those mistakes, go overboard on certain things to then only see where I am and then reel it back in and say, these other things are also important in my life. And that means I have to make time for them.
So that's what my colleagues had to share. And there's something else I'd like to share with you too. This summer has been really hard, I imagine for you as well as for me. In my case, my partner and I had to separate for a while for practical reasons. I moved down to Southern California on my own and couldn't really meet new people. I was low on work. There wasn't really much going on for me. Except these Claris Engage sessions. Basically, I did what Wim talked about. I went into my safe bubble, interviewing people, editing their stories, watching those stories over and over again to decide what to cut and what to keep. And just this past week, while I was doing my final editing, something clicked. My depression began to lift. I started some projects with new clients and found myself working with a new level of confidence and skill. I have to say, it really does help to talk to other people and learn from their experience. I hope that these interviews have felt like mini mentorships to you, and that they may inspire you to seek out a mentor or act as a mentor for somebody else, or both. We need each other right now. With everything that's going on in the world and so much uncertainty, planning for your career might seem unimportant or even trivial, but helping each other never is. Here are a few resources I recommend. I enjoyed reading them. They were some of the initial research I conducted when I was still thinking about preparing a formal talk. And there's some people I want to thank too. Martha Zink, who brainstormed with me about making this proposal back in January, and Sarah Severson and Wim DeCourt, my mentors at Soliant, who both had an influence on how this talk developed. And my husband, Juan Alejandro Ochoa, who reviewed the final version of this talk and who is a brilliant leader, mentor, and career advisor in his own right. And of course, you as well. Thank you for spending this time with me and with my colleagues. Our community is so helpful and so collaborative. I appreciate how you contribute to that, and I hope you'll share some of your own thoughts and experiences in the comments. Take good care. Bye-bye.